Well, welcome to this episode of Divine Discourse. My name is Dr. Irby Valdez, and I am here with Mr. Marco Valdez, my son, my theological sparring partner, my friend, and I'm just thankful that you're here. And before we begin, I do want to thank you for being here because I'm hoping that this is going to be a regular thing. I don't want to call you a guest. I think that you're going to be the person that we're always going to be bouncing off things here on this podcast. So thanks again for being here.
No, it's an honor. Yes.
Um, Tell us a little bit about yourself before we begin, because I know there's folks out there that don't know who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime anybody asks me to introduce myself, I always usually tell them that first and foremost, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
I put a lot of my identity in my beliefs, and for me, to me, that's very important.
Yeah.
And but more on my personal side, I'm 26 years old. I'm obviously a Sunday school teacher at New Spirit Church. I'm actually scheduled to get married next Friday, so I'm
That's in
excited
a
about
week.
that.
Yeah, less than a week away. How do you feel? You excited?
I'm excited. I know a lot of people who get married. They're having to do a lot of planning, but to me, I'm excited about it, just to start this new chapter of my life that God has in store for me.
And I know most of the viewers out there are going to agree with this. You're 26 years old. You're a graduate from A&M San Antonio. You're a licensed insurance agent. You have a good career going. You just bought yourself your first house, and you're about to get married. Godly man. Most people would agree when I say that you are above and beyond the average of what a person your age would be doing. You just have God has blessed you with a life that I would say is an obedient life, because I've seen you, and
I truly feel blessed, and it's all God.
well, amen to that. And thanks for being here. And we're going to talk about several things that I think are going to be important tonight. And I think it's going to be one that I'm thankful that we're going to be able to bounce things off of each other here. But it's a difficult topic, and it's a topic that Jordan Peterson said, where fools rush in and so quickly jump in, but angels fear to tread. And I think it's true for this topic, and it is this discussion on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And we see what's been going on in the news. It's been difficult to see some of the images that are unfolding. It's difficult to see just the chaos that ensues. But it's also been equally difficult to see what's happening in our own nation, how it's become divided over this issue over Israel and Palestine, and where should people stand and so forth. So tonight, we're not only going to discuss the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we're going to be more pointed on because this is really a Christian podcast, of course, right? So I want to approach it from the Christian perspective. How should Christians understand this conflict? And more pointed to the question, does Israel matter anymore? How should Christians understand Israel, the Middle Eastern conflict, and what does the Bible say about it, and what is the role of the Christian in view of what's unfolding in Israel? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And I think that one of the best ways for me to start off that question is this. If you've found yourself kind of struggling, like, yeah, I don't know, man, because I see conservatives out there, even opposing Israel and standing against them and free Palestine, and they're an oppressed people, and
You see so many points of views just being thrown around, and I think it's important for us to really look at it from a biblical lens. You see a lot of college protesters, a lot of these college students going on and, waving Palestinian flags around and harassing Jewish students.
Yeah.
And, it makes me wonder, like, why do they support such this cause?
A lot of them, they don't even know what the cause is.
Yeah, and actually, I remember this one student they were interviewing. This journalist came up to her and they were asking, "Hey, what's going on?" Like, well, like deer in headlights. Like, well, I'm not sure what's going on. I'm just over here because I saw the big crowd. But, they have no idea what they're getting
they don't know the
into.
history, the background, the understanding of it, and been this cause, and that's the problem, because the world has gotten behind this whole thing, and the majority of that mob, that crowd, has no clue what it's doing or what's happening. And really, I think a lot of the leaders that are out there that are doing this, even they are really blind and ignorant to what's going on. So let me start off by asking this question. If you're a Christian out there and you've been dealing with this and you're like, man, yeah, I've been struggling with this because I've seen lots of different views and positions. Here's the question. What's the popular opinion? Here's what I mean by that. You say, well, what do you mean? What's the popular opinion? Ask yourself, what is the popular worldly opinion? Like if you were to go out and look and say, what is the popular view? What is the popular position? Well, why? Why should I care about what the popular position is? Because when we see where the world is standing, where the world is applauding, where the public is applauding, that's a good indication of probably where we don't need to be. Because what does light have to do with darkness? What does the world have to do with the Christian faith? So here's my point. And I mean, I want to challenge the readers out there or the listeners out there to really think about this. If you hold a view that's central to your tenets of faith, and the world applauds it, says, yes, we support you, and the public applauds you, then you might want to recheck that position. Because Jesus says that he would be hated by this world. And as he was hated, so should we. And so if the world is in agreement with you, you need to recheck your position. That's why I say, what's the popular opinion on this deal with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Well, think about it. You said the campus protests. Whose side is the campus protest on? Is it on the Israeli side or on the Palestinian side?
Well, I mean, it's majority I've seen is just Palestinian side.
Yeah.
And you have not just the students in support of it, but some of these administrators, these academic professors, the deans of these universities who are supposed to be the ones guiding and
Yes.
educating our youth. And over here, they're siding and taking sides with these students. They're radical students.
Yes, and so that's a failure of our educational system. But what people don't know is that a lot of these people, these professors and so forth, these universities have been funded with Middle Eastern entities. A lot of these, Harvard and we saw Columbia University. A lot of the funding comes from these Middle Eastern groups, and so they're going to have their agendas are going to and their motivations are going to be kind of put forth there. So yeah, you see this. In fact, in these campus protests, you know what you saw? You saw anti-Semitism. You saw some of these Jewish students trying to go into their dorms and trying to get back, and they were blocked. I mean, people they wouldn't let them come on campus. And many of those protesters, they weren't even students in that campus. They didn't even belong there. But that is the reality of what's happening. So what is the popular opinion? The popular opinion is that Hamas and Palestine are oppressed, that the Palestinians have been oppressed by Israel. Israel is this huge monster of a political machine, and they're just pounding and destroying and trying to commit ethnic cleansing and genocide on these poor victims of Palestine. And woe is me, and how dare they? Why don't they just stop and end the war? But they're just, that's the narrative that's being given to us right now.
To me, it sounds like wordplay because you hear these terms, genocide, and thrown around casually, but do you understand what that word means?
Yeah.
A lot of these students who are throwing around genocide and
Yeah. So think about that genocide, right? Genocide is the obviously the attempt to eradicate an entire people based on their race and culture. That's obviously what Hitler wanted to do in World War II with the Nazis with the Jewish people. Over 6 million died, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if Israel really was that, if they were so determined, if they really were trying to commit ethnic cleansing, then why would they worry about where they're targeting their missiles and trying to target Hamas? They would just blow up everything. They would. I mean, look. Israel has nuclear weapons. Israel has an arsenal that could turn that whole area into a big old parking lot easily. Why haven't they done that? If they're really determined to kill everybody, why do they show restraint? Why are they so careful to try to pinpoint the enemy, which is Hamas, rather than just killing everyone?
To me, it sounds like it's just a narrative that's being promoted, and it's all demonic. in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, and the popular opinion right now is being promoted in Hollywood, on the media outlets. Celebrities are coming out and saying, "Oh, I support Palestine." All this stuff. And there's a whole lot of ignorance. You remember Black Lives Matter? You remember that a few years ago?
Yeah,
All
with
the
George
people.
Floyd and all that riots going on.
Yeah. So you ask yourself, when's the last time you saw a Black Lives Matter rally or a protest? It's been a while, right?
Yeah.
So whatever happened to them, right? Well, of course, people are saying like, well, they were committing fraud, and there were, the money wasn't. They didn't spend the money. What millions and millions of dollars spent, and they didn't even do. Why? Because it's a radical, um, a platform that's not meant to do what it really was promoting itself, right? Oh, we're going to end racism. A lot of these underprivileged communities that said, hey, they never came back. They never helped us build a park. They never promoted. They never supported us. They never used the monies for that. What you found was money being used in a fraudulent way, and the public was taken advantage of because they took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. So did Black Lives Matter and all this stuff? Did they just disappear? No. Now they've joined the Free Palestine cause. Those same radicals are now just protesting another thing. It's all meant to deceive. It's all meant to build anger and hatred and division. That's exactly what the enemy does.
He's trying to lead us astray.
Yes, and all this anger. I mean, think about it. If Black Lives Matter was supposed to end racism and build unity, why did it do the exact opposite? Because people were blind to seeing that's not what its true agenda was. It was to cause division and all this stuff. And you look at this whole Free Palestine, we want peace. No, it's creating the opposite effect. And so what you're seeing here is that the popular side of things, and I'm not saying that the popular side is always wrong, but if you look at where the world stands on all this stuff, you're going to see, think about it, Hamas, CNN, Billie Eilish and The Weeknd, Rachel Zegler, Cardi B, these people have come out and, I support. Is that where you want to stand? Like if I would tell the Christian, okay, why stand over here? Or, okay, so if you stand in a place where Hamas, this terrorist group, would applaud you and agree with you, like, oh, wait a minute, you're in agreement with me? Or if these satanic and these secular artists would applaud you and say, yes, we stand with you, like, oh, wait, you're here with me too? Then you need to check it. That's why I say, what's the popular opinion? Because for a Christian, if you're standing with the world, then you're probably standing in the wrong place. So most people don't even know what the problem is, and they can't define it, and they need to be educated. So with that being said, before I really dive into this, I want to recommend a video that you can go see, and that is a video on YouTube of an interview between Jordan Peterson, whom most people know. He's a psychologist. He's popular. He stands a lot for much of the conservative and more of the traditional values. But he's a philosopher. He's just an amazing guy. We went to go see him whenever he came down and here to Texas, and it was a great event.
Mm-hmm.
But he interviews a man named Mossab Hassan Youssef.
Yeah, and actually, I have his autobiography right here. And
Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I remember you gave me this book about maybe 4 years ago, and I only read about halfway through the first time. And so at first I thought it was okay. Well, this is a very interesting, testimony, but it really wasn't until this whole Palestinian-Israeli conflict became worldwide news that it got me back on this topic. And I immediately went back and I reread the book, and this time I actually finished the entire book. And it's an incredible life journey because in this book, you see him battling with betrayal. You see him working with the IDF, and it's a great testimony because he was the son of the founder of the Hamas.
Yeah.
His father founded Hamas.
Yeah.
And so,
which is the title of the book. That's the reason why it's called Son of Hamas.
yeah, and so from all available metrics, he was supposed to be the next heir, and so he was supposed to take Hamas on, after his father, but instead he actually turns away from Islam, and as a result, he gets ostracized and shunned by his own father and his family.
He's had death threats. I mean, he left that world behind, and what happened was he was in a spiritual journey, seeking God, and he realized that this faith that he grew up in, it didn't posit what he understood to be like, is this really God? Is it about hatred? And the whole purpose of life is just to eradicate the Jews? Is that really all that life is about, you know? And so, yeah, his journey led him to realize that this faith that he grew up in and this radical jihadist worldview, his encounter with the Palestinian people in their conflict with, of course, he grew up in that. He's, grew up Palestinian. But his encounter also with the Jewish people and so forth, and realizing that he was on the wrong side of things, and that his conviction that he could serve a better purpose helping the IDF and helping the Israelis to prevent terroristic attacks and save lives. And to the point that he encountered the Christian faith, and even in the book he says he came eventually to the belief that Jesus is indeed the Son of God. Now, we can talk about his personal spiritual journey at another time. That's really not the point of our conversation, because it's up in the air whether where he came to land on a specific faith concerning Jesus and as a Christian. But the point is this man is an authority. He's an authority. Why do you go to CNN? Why do you go to find out what Cardi B says? Why do you go to TikTok? Why do you go to these platforms where the people half of them are completely idiotic about what they're saying, and the other half don't know, they're ignorant. And now there are a few that give really good information. I'm not saying that there isn't out there, but so many people out there talking about it, they don't even know what they're talking about. It's like Jesus says, the blind leading the blind, right?
Oh yeah.
And this man was there. He grew up in it. He was part of Hamas. His father founded Hamas. He was there in Palestine. He was there dealing with the Israeli conflict. And the man knows, and everything that he says, he has nothing good to say about Hamas. He has nothing good to say about the whole issue between the Palestinians and everything. He has nothing good to say about the Islamic faith that posits this extremism of death and destruction and to kill all the Christians and Jews. So you really want to know what's going on? Go to the authority. Go to somebody that's been there and done that. Don't go to these people that they tote this sort of this false morality to make themselves feel good. Like, oh, I'm going to stand on this side so I can look good before the world. And that's what they're doing. If I go and make a sign and I go stand with them, look how good I am as a person. They can pat themselves on the back, but that's shallow and superficial. That's not fulfilling. If you really care about this conflict, educate yourself correctly. And that's what we're going to try to really do here, because most people don't know what the real problem is. They can't define it. When you say Palestine, what do you mean by Palestine? Most people can't define it. What is Israel? I had remember one time a person saying, well, Israel, what do you mean by Israel? What do you mean Israel? You mean Israel the people? You mean Israel the culture? You mean Israel the ethnicity? Do you mean Israel the faith? What do you mean by Israel? Or do you mean Israel the nation? So there's all these different terms that are being used. What is Hamas? And is it the same as Palestine? You go to the people at those protests and you ask these questions, they don't know. They have no clue how to answer these.
They probably couldn't even tell you where Israel was on a map.
No. And so a lot of these people are being led astray. And so I'm hoping that this video is good material for you Christians out there to know how to navigate the things, because the honest truth is that there's even churches right now that are standing on the side of Free Palestine, just like they were a few years ago, positing Black Lives Matter. Like, well, be careful, because they stand also for transgender rights and the overturning of patriarchal and advancing feminism and racial divides, everything that's anti-biblical. But yeah, go ahead. And so be careful, because there are platforms out there that may sound good and sound nice. And this whole pro-Palestinian movement seems like one of those. But no, you need to know your history, and that's what we're going to do. Because you're right, you said something that's important. They're word games. All these words that are being used, and all of it is demonic. It's all demonic. And to me, it's the same game that the enemy has been playing with the same objective, going all the way back to even the Garden of Eden and the first human sin. You go back to Genesis 3:1, and what does the enemy do? What does he say to Eve to get her to stray away from God? What is the question he presents to her?
He says, did God really say?
Did God really say? Think about that. The implications of that question is this. Is this really the authority of God's word? Did God really say? Well, yeah, Mr. Satan. Actually, yeah. Yeah, God did say. but he's causing her to question the authority of God's word.
I think he's planting a seed of doubt in her mind.
Yes. And that's what's happening in our culture today with this.
Mm-hmm.
It's making the person who should be faithful to the biblical values and the things that we should know about Israel and its relationship with God, and it's planting seeds. Oh, well, did God really say that? Like, well, no, I mean, look what's going on with Palestine, whatever. So let's set the record straight, because all of these things we need to address. And I think that's why so many people are led astray. They don't know their history, they don't know Scripture, and they're not asking the right questions. So let's ask the right questions. What is Israel? Is it an ethnic people? Is it a nation? Is it a political identity? Or is it a faith? And the answer is, what do you think?
Well, I think they're all those things.
Absolutely. They're all those things. Israel, the word Israel is a multifaceted thing. Where do we start with Israel? Here's where we start. Let's start with the name Israel. Where does the name Israel come from? And it comes from Jacob. Jacob was the grandson of Abraham, about 1900 BC. So we're talking about almost 4,000 years ago. God calls a man named Abraham to come down to the promised land, leave the land. He's in the land of Cush. Leave this land and go to a land that I will show you. He doesn't even know where he's going, but he trusts God. Abraham comes down, and God makes a covenant with him. Through you, I'm going to bless all nations, right? He has Isaac. Isaac has Jacob. Jacob, man, Jacob is something else. He's a numbskull, man. He at first he cons his brother out of his because he's the eldest, right?
Yeah, well, he conned him out of his birthright whenever Esau came in, and he was hungry, that he gave him a bowl of stew in exchange for his birthright.
Yeah, so he steals his birthright. At the end, his father blesses him rather than his older brother Esau. So he steals his blessing. Esau wants to kill him now. He runs off, and for 20 years he's in a distant land trying to restore his life. But 20 years later, he comes back, and he's on his way back, and he's facing all these past decisions. And it says that he has a vision of a stairway to heaven, which is for you Led Zeppelin fans out there. That's where that name goes. And he encounters an angel with which he wrestles all night long. Now, people say, well, how did he wrestle? I think he was in conflict with himself because he had encountered God. He had to encounter his own life and his decisions. He wrestles with this man and this angel of God. The sun is about to come out, and he realizes this is no ordinary man. And the angel of God says, let me go, for the sun is breaking. You've been wrestling all night. He goes, no, I won't let you go until you bless me. Well, he gets his wish. The angel blesses him. But you know what he also does? He renames him. You used to be called Jacob, which means he who grabs the heel. He was a heel grabber. He was that money maker. He was the guy that tried to cut every corner. He was that cheater. Your name is now Israel. That's where the name comes from. This man Jacob was renamed Israel, and this is about 1600 BC. And Israel means he who wrestles with God.
And I know in ancient Near East cultures, names have so much power and authority, and for God to rename him, and I know he renames Abram to Abraham, and so we see other examples of God renaming someone. And
yes, it's like a changing of identity.
Mm-hmm.
So Jacob now becomes Israel, he who wrestles with God, and his people shall play that out, because what you read in the rest of history, in the biblical history, is Israel wrestling with God. They're wrestling with this notion of God and trying to do the right thing, but they can't, and everything. And a lot of people can relate with that, right?
Mm.
So Jacob has 12 kids. One of those kids is Joseph. Joseph is betrayed by his brothers, and he's sold into slavery in Egypt. Jacob, this is about 1600 BC now. He's occupying the land that we now know as Israel, that area, the promised land, right? Palestinian region. And his son Joseph is sold into bondage. He thinks his son is dead, but later finds out that he's alive, and he's the number 2 guy in Egypt. God has blessed him because he's a faithful guy. His brothers and them are restored. Why? Because God allows a famine to come out into the land of what that's called the promised land in Palestine, and he's forced to go to Egypt to buy food, and that's where they get reconciled, where they get connected. His son Joseph says, Dad, y'all come on over here, man. I'm number 2 guy here. I'm a big deal, right? And so they come and they're blessed, and they now live in Egypt, and there's this great relationship between the Jewish people and the Egyptians. They have a great relationship. And if you follow the history of the Jewish people, this is what happens. Everywhere they go, blessings follow. So then they're there for about 400 years. But eventually, Joseph, the good things of Joseph and all those things, they're forgotten. And the people of Egypt eventually not only forget about those things, they oppress them and eventually put them into bondage where they become slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And along comes a man that we know as
Oh, Moses.
Moses, right? He calls Moses, hey, God calls him and says, go over there and set my people free. It's time for them to come back and reclaim their home.
Mm.
So now we're, when we look at the timeline here, we're looking now at Moses coming in about the 13th century BC. And Moses now goes and he confronts Pharaoh. They're delivered and they go through, they're set free. They go through the wilderness 40 years and they enter into the promised land, but it's not until Moses passes away and Joshua leads them. So Joshua leads them to reclaim Canaan. So again, this is about the 13th century BC, and they reclaim it. And then about another, I guess you could say about another 300 years, this is where we read the book of Judges. The people inhabit the land, but they're not unified. It's not about 1000 BC, so that's 3,000 years ago. 1000 BC, that the nation of Israel was unified under King Saul. After King Saul comes King David, the famous King David, right? And then after King David comes his son Solomon, who builds the first temple there on the Temple Mount. So the first temple built there on Mount Zion in Jerusalem was the temple, the Jewish temple, built by Solomon. Okay, this is many thousands of years before the Dome of the Rock, the mosque that you see now. So they build that temple, and there they live for many years, and it's been probably 200 years now that they're living peacefully. Everything's going good. But then in 722 BC, Israel is destroyed by the Assyrians because they have not followed God. God allows this punishment to happen. 722 BC, under Sennacherib and the Assyrians, the northern tribe is destroyed. Well, why are there two tribes? Because after Solomon dies, the nation of Israel is divided into two kingdoms. The 10 tribes of Israel up to the north, and the 2 tribes to the south, which is Judah and Benjamin, which is around the Jerusalem area in that southern kingdom. So they're split because they don't agree on who should be king. The northern kingdom, again in 722 BC, is eradicated. Those 10 tribes lost to history, or so we think. Well, the southern kingdom persists, but they don't make it much longer. 586 BC, they're destroyed by the Babylonians and King Nebuchadnezzar, and they're taken as slaves into Babylon and in that area. So now it's 586 BC. The temple has been destroyed, the temple that Solomon built. Jerusalem, they've taken all the Jewish people out of their homeland again. And God says, it shall be so for 70 years. And it's as such. 70 years they're out as slaves, out in bondage. And then in 515 BC, now the Babylonians have been conquered by the Medo-Persians, and Cyrus the Great, the Persian leader, allows them to go back home. And so you read in the Bible about how they came back home, rebuilt the walls, and rebuilt the temple. This is now the second temple. They rebuild that temple, and they re-inhabit their homeland that's rightfully theirs. So now it's 515 BC. And there they are, and they're living, and everything's good. But then a few hundred years later, a couple hundred years later, another empire arises, and that is the Empire of Rome. And that's the Jerusalem in which Jesus is born into. Because when Jesus comes onto the scene, about 0 BC, around there, we don't have to talk about the exact date, but anyway, Jesus is born into an Israel that is an oppressed state by the greater Roman government.
Yeah, and since you've brought up the history of Israel, one of the common things I'm hearing is Israel being oppressed by another great nation. So they're oppressed, they get exiled, and then they finally get back home, and then they get
Kicked out again.
Yeah. So and all of this predates all of the claims
long
that
before a Palestinian ever even walked.
Yeah, these are a course of thousands of years.
Even long before
well
Palestine
before
existed.
it predates. And one of the things I want to also mention too is never once do the Israelis claim victimhood. All they do is they go back home and they start rebuilding.
Every time. when enemies have tried to destroy them. Every time when conquerors have come and eradicated them, they didn't take this I'm a poor me victim attitude, and that's a message for our culture today. Anytime a culture takes on this attitude of victimhood, you know what happens? Oh, I'm owed, I'm due. This idea of I'm entitled to things. You owe me things. No, you know what? You look at cultures. Like, I mean, think about it. Like, look at the Asian people. Look at the Chinese who came during the 19th century and early 20th century. They were oppressed here in America, but they never felt sorry for themselves. They are one of the most hyper successful people in the world. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they were bitterly defeated in World War II. They didn't go, oh, woe is us, we're owed and you owe us restitution. No, they just got up and they rebuilt themselves. But anytime a society takes on this idea of victimhood, they stop working for themselves to rebuild themselves, and they think somebody else owes them to do it for them.
Yeah, and since you're mentioning on the topic of these ethnicities, like how much percentage is the Jewish population in the world? I think I read a statistic saying it's less than 0.5%.
That's right. That's a great point. It's actually 0.2% of the world's population. So when you really look at it, you see this group that makes up a microcosm of the world population. And I'll get to that because I've got something to say about it. But before I do, the oppression that follows Israel is not over yet, right? Jesus comes on the scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here they are oppressed by the Romans. Well, Jesus dies in 33 AD. He ascends to heaven. He says, but he prophesies, this temple, the second temple, that's going to be destroyed too. And in 70 AD, under the Emperor Titus now, the Romans come back because the Jewish people rebel against Rome. And so Titus goes in, destroys everything, destroys the temple again. Right now, there's only the Western Wall. That Western Wall is all that remains. And that's why they weep there. That's why they pray there, because they're praying for the day when the third temple can be rebuilt, when that temple can be rebuilt again.
Mm.
So now the Romans destroy them. Not only do they destroy them, they kick them out of Jerusalem. You're out of here. You don't belong here anymore.
Mm.
And so the people of Israel have been oppressed since the onset. They've been attacked. And you look and you go, why has the world demonstrated so much hatred against this people? What is it about this people that I mean, even Hitler, of course, we go back now future, and in the 40s, the early 1940s, leading up until 1945 at the end of World War II, you have Hitler trying to eradicate the Jews. Why does the world hate the Jews so much?
I think it's because God has chosen Israel to be his people. And ever since that declaration, the enemy has sought after to go and destroy them.
Yes, yes. And so the enemy heard that one. Oh, really? Those are your people? Then they shall be my greatest enemy. I shall seek to destroy them. And that's the amazing thing. Here's little Israel. Like Israel right now, it's smaller than the size of New Jersey. There it is, surrounded by enemies. And yet, how does it persist? Good luck. Go find an Amalekite today. Go find an Assyrian today. Go find a Babylonian today. They're all gone. These great empires, they've come and gone. Even Rome, the one that would supposedly last forever, they're all gone. But little Israel persists. Why? Because they're God's chosen people. Now, somebody's going to say, whoa, wait a minute, Pastor. What do you mean that they're God's? Aren't we as Christians God's chosen people? Yes, I'll get to that. But the point I'm trying to make is that there is a promise that looms over Israel. There's a promise over Israel. And as soon as we forget about that promise that is still yet to be completely fulfilled, we lose our way. Don't you dare forget that there's a promise over Israel that God has made. So the history of Israel is a people that has been made enemies by the world. So is Israel an ethnic people in a nation? Yes. And they're a friend to the United States. And we must remain a friend to them. Why? Because that promise is not only for them, but for whoever interacts with them. So notice this Abrahamic promise that God makes. Remember Abraham, he calls to the promised land?
He makes a covenant with him. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so listen to the promise that God makes over him. He says to you, Abram, this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to make you into a great nation. I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to make your name great. And that it's turned out to be as such, right? So that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and those who dishonor you I will curse. In you all the families of earth shall be blessed. Be very careful. Now, there's a lot of people out there that have denied Israel, but I'm going to tell you, you go back and look. Did you know that there was a lawmaker in Turkey who got up and he declared death to Israel, and that they shall be destroyed, and immediately fell with a heart attack and died?
Wow. Yeah.
You know, you look at these things of people who stand against them, and they don't make it much. I mean, God is not to be mocked, and we're not supposed to take these promises lightly. So let me ask you, and this is for the viewers out there: do you think God's word ever fades away? Do you think God says something, you're like, yeah, but that was 200 years ago. It's not as potent anymore. Do you think so? No.
No.
When God says something, it is, and it will always be. God made a blessing over Abraham, and he blessed them, that his peoples, that whoever blessed them, he would bless, and whoever dishonored them, they would curse. Be very careful. Be careful where you stand. So Israel is not only a nation and a people that we should continue to root for, but it's also a faith, which is what we talk about, Judaism, right? Judaism is the embracing of what Christians know as the Old Testament. To them belong the prophets. To them become the lineage. And as Jesus said to the Samaritan woman, you worship what you do not know, but we worship for what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Don't forget that Jesus came through the lineage of the Jewish people to fulfill something. And there's still a plan over Israel for this. And it goes back to the prodigal story. Y'all know the prodigal story. Jesus is talking to these Pharisees that they don't want to celebrate with them when they see Jesus bring the tax collectors and the sinners and the prostitutes to faith. And they refuse to come in and celebrate. And Jesus says, I got a story for you. It's his son who didn't want to be with his dad, took all this stuff, went and acted a fool, lost all his money, came back. You know the story. If not, go read it. And he says this father threw a party for his son. But the elder son heard what was going on and refused to go in. And the father comes outside beckoning him, come on, your brother's back. He was dead. Now he's alive again. And he refuses to come in. What's the point of that story? Everybody thinks the point of the story is the prodigal son. No, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees who embody the spirit of the elder son, who refuse to celebrate, who refuse to believe, and as therefore are left outside, unwilling to come into the celebration. That's where Israel is now, my friends. Israel is that elder brother. So if you say, is there a special, obviously we want everybody to be saved, right? God desires all be saved. He wants the Palestinians, he wants the Africans, he wants the Asians, he wants the Mexicans, he wants everybody in the world to be saved. But there's a promise that's specific and unique over Israel. And so in my relationship to Israel, I see them as that elder brother that I'm trying to deliver the gospel to, and I'm beckoning them, come inside and celebrate. God is still waiting on you.
So we should see Israel more as a lost brother rather than just a foreigner.
Yes, absolutely. That lost brother that we need to continue to deliver the gospel to, because there is a promise over them. Well, what does it matter if they're saved versus somebody else? Because God has made prophecies over Israel that he has not made over any other country. And those prophecies actually point to, listen to this, the fulfillment of the end times. In fact, I'm going to show you here in a little bit that the nation of Israel coming to faith in Christ eventually is going to be the inciting flame, I guess you could say, or the key momentous event that is going to initiate the coming and the return of Jesus. Not any other nation, but this obstinate people who wrestles with God, who's always been stubborn, and God says, through you, I'm going to show the world that all nations will eventually come to believe in my son. And so this is an important point, because I think that when we understand the relationship between Israel and God, everything makes sense. So now it leads to this question: what is Palestine? Palestine's not a state; it's not a country. It's a region that that we know as Palestine. That wasn't called Palestine until 2,000 years ago with the Romans. So you remember the Emperor Titus going in, destroying everything, kicking out the Jews?
The destruction of the Second Temple.
Yes. When that happened, the Romans tried to eradicate the history of the Jewish people there. Thousands of years of history. Oh, we want them to be lost to history. So let's rename the area. We're not going to call it Israel anymore, which is what its name was, rightfully so, 1,000 years ago, right? 2,000 years ago. Instead, let's call it Palestine. Why? Because there was an ancient people there that had lived there that had been enemies of the Israelites, called the Philistines. You know who's the famous Philistine you remember?
Well, the one in Bible study I remember as a kid was Goliath.
Yeah, right. The big old Goliath, the one that King David killed with a single swing of of his little slingshot.
Mm-hmm.
So they named it Palestine based on this group of people that had served as enemies of Israel. So the Roman people had tried to rewrite the history of that land. They tried to let the world forget about that. But don't make a mistake. Who do you think was behind all that? That was Satan, trying to eradicate the history of the people. Satan has been attacking this people from the beginning, and we have to have eyes to see it. So when they say, "Well, we were here first," no, they weren't. No, they weren't. The Jewish people long predate that, and it really wasn't until 1948. So they go through all this stuff, right? It wasn't when the British until partitioned the land after World War I, and then leading into 1948, when the Jewish people were allowed to return to their homeland, that they finally came together, created their parliament, and they declared themselves a nation again. 1948, almost 2,000 years that they had been kicked out of their land, they were finally able to do it again. Now, you want to tell me that Israel doesn't matter anymore? Then you answer me this. They became a nation in one day, in May of 1948.
In one day.
In one day. They came together, and they agreed that they would be formed as a nation, and they were acknowledged. This was through the working of the United Nations. This is obviously following World War II. I mean, think about it. The Jewish people looking for a way to restart their life after what Hitler had done to them, right?
Mm.
And you go back to to Isaiah's prophecy, and in Isaiah's prophecy, he says, "Can the Lord create a nation in one day?" It was a prophecy that Israel would be reestablished in one day again. How can you tell me that Israel doesn't matter anymore now that the church, the Christian church, now has replaced it? If God is still talking about Israel, he's still fulfilling prophecy about Israel, he's still working with Israel through the prophecies of Isaiah and other parts of the passage, which leads me to this deal. How should we understand this Palestinian issue? Israel became a nation, but Palestine did not. You know why? Because they could not submit to a leadership. They have always been very violent and aggressive in their approach to things, and everything that they do and they exist is to eradicate Israel. They take all these billions of dollars that they've made, and they don't build their country up like a normal country would do, like Israel did. They devoted it to weaponry. They devoted it to building these tunnels, and they neglected their people because they don't care about their people.
No, they don't.
No, they just wanted to destroy Israel. So Palestine is divided in two areas, the Gaza and the West Bank, both ruled by different ruling groups. The PLO in the West Bank, and Gaza, of course, by Hamas. Hamas is not a political leadership. They are a terrorist group. They're a terrorist group. So Christians, what role should you take? What position should you take? If you side with Palestine, you're supporting a group that is led by a terrorist organization known as Hamas. Read the book, Son of Hamas. Watch this interview with Jordan Peterson, and you'll get all your details on that. So here you have Israel, this little speck of democracy in the Middle East, and it's surrounded by these enemies. And what you see here is what the Palestinians are hell-bent, literally hell-bent, to destroy Israel. So you asked a question about the Jewish people. You said, how many people, right? 0.2% of the world's population. That's it. The Jews make up 0.2%. They don't even make up 0.5%. They don't even make that. They're less than 0.5%.
No, wow.
Of the world's population. And yet, listen to this, they've won over 20% of Nobel Prizes out there.
Wow.
You tell me that they're not a blessed people? You tell me that they don't contribute to the advancement of our world and our culture? That is a radical number to think of. The point is this: God has blessed these people. 204 out of around 900 awarded Nobel Prizes since the start of the 20th century belong to the Jewish people. Why? Because there's a promise over Israel. There's still a promise looming, and we may think that God has forgotten about it, but God does not forget his promises. And so, yes, there's a war. Yes, there's people dying. Yes, I think the latest statistics was over 37,000 people, including many, women and children on both sides, right? And we do need to make every effort, everything in our power to stop the war. We want the war to end, absolutely. Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, right? But the question is what's the best way to do it? And the best way to do it is not just to tell Israel to stop. A terrorist organization is at their doorsteps. On October 7th, in 2003,
23.
23. What did I say?
2003.
Oh, I'm sorry, 23. Yeah, just last year. Hamas, as well as other groups, organized a horrific attack on Israel. Thousands died, right? I mean, it's just innocent civilians, women and children. Everybody's outraged at Israel. Why is nobody outraged at Hamas? Where's the outrage? Where's the outrage of what they're doing? Why is no one talking about Hamas surrendering? Why do they keep saying, well, Israel needs to put down its weapons? Hey, listen, you go and you attack these people, you kill innocent babies and children, and there's horrific videos out there of that.
I have no doubt if Israel were to lay down its weapons, Hamas would find any sort of reason to fight and to destroy each other.
Yeah, you know why they asked for a ceasefire? Because they'd already done the damage. So, like, they go and they hit and they destroy and they kill them, and then when they come back and we're like, okay, ceasefire now. Like, no, that's not the way it works.
Yeah, it's like some bully going up and he punches some kid, and then that kid and he attacks him back, and then the bully's coming crying,
getting beat up,
yeah,
and they're like, oh wait, no. Like, no, by your force. Now there was this resistance. Israel is a sovereign nation, and they have a right to defend their borders and protect their people. Why? Go talk to people who are all pro-Palestinian, and you start this way. You want to test it? Here's the way to test it. All right, you want to have a conversation? Okay, let's start with this. Why don't you condemn the attacks that happened? And I said October 7th, it's October 10th.
October 7th.
It was? Okay, good. So ask them, can we start by this? Can we start by condemning that what Hamas did there was a horrific, evil attack? Well, no, let's talk about, no. If you and I can't even agree that a group of people unprovoked, broke through a barrier, came across the fence, went into a group of Jewish settlements, and innocently bashed their heads in, cut people's heads off, burned them alive, raped, pillaged, did all these things to these people that had done nothing to them. And if you and I can't agree that that's something wrong, then you're dealing with an illogical people, and that's the problem. That's the spirit of jihadism. Be careful who you stand with, because when you stand with Palestine, you're standing with this evil terroristic group known as Hamas, who leads the people. Hamas needs to be removed. So what would a nation do? What would we want to do? For example, we have a border crisis here in Texas and in the South, right? We have these Mexican cartels, and they're brutal, they're barbaric, they cut people's heads off. They do. I mean, we've heard these stories, right? Now, imagine the DEA and the government go and they attack these Mexican cartels, and they're arresting them and everything. Do we go, oh no, free the Mexican cartels, free them? They're an oppressed people. Oh no, they have rights. No, you say no, they're criminals. By their own hand and their own decisions, they have attacked and brutally assaulted and done all these things. No, they've forsaken their rights. They have no rights. They need to be arrested and removed. But we look at these terroristic people that have done these horrific crimes, and we say, oh, free them. Like, no, you're dealing with criminals. So there's this question: who has hostages? Right? Does Israel have hostages? Does Palestine has hostages, or Hamas? They go, yes, both sides. No, they don't. The Hamas people have hostages. Where's the outrage of these hostages? If Israel was doing the same thing with hostages as what Palestine was doing, there'd be an outrage that nobody would support. Yeah, it's a hypocritical response.
Yeah, and then on the Palestinians tried to claim like, oh well, Israel has hostages too. But I mean, you have to remember that hostages is somebody taken without their consent. It was them taken and abducted, kidnapped.
That's right. So the difference is that's not to me. Here's how you need to understand it. Those aren't called hostages. They're called prisoners. Okay? If you have somebody break into your house and the police come and they arrest them, are they taking a hostage, friends? No, they're taking a prisoner. That's what Israel's doing. Oh, but they're killing people when they bomb whatever. Where's the outrage that Hamas is hiding behind innocent civilians? Where's the outrage that they're putting their bombs in schools and hospitals? Why? Because they know that Israel, they can't attack there, because and then they'll face scrutiny for killing innocents. See, it's all that's the play of terroristic people. Why are people not angry there? Why is all the focus on what Israel's doing and not on the focus on Hamas? So you want to end the war? Here's how you do it. You have Hamas put its weapons down. You have Hamas surrender, and you replace the leadership there, not with the terroristic group, but with a group of people that can actually learn how to govern their people without creating bloodshed and violence everywhere in the region.
I agree.
And so that's the difference, and that's how Christians need to understand it. The extremist game has been to paint this narrative with Palestine as oppressed. My friends, if Palestine is oppressed, it's not oppressed by Israel. It's oppressed by Hamas and these terroristic groups.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will say this. Mossab Youssef, he says that they're all wicked and violent, and if anybody knows it's him, he grew up in that culture. He's from that culture. But I'm hopeful. Maybe I have this hope that maybe the people there can be transformed. But I'm going to tell you, without Jesus, there's no hope. But these people, they need, I hope, if they have a new leadership that doesn't posit this extreme jihadism and doesn't suppress all this, because I get what he's saying. He's saying, look at the videos. It's not just Hamas celebrating the streets. They're dragging this poor, brutalized, broken girl, her legs and awkward. These people that have been murdered, they ran them through the streets of Gaza, and the regular people, even kids, were cheering, yay.
Yeah.
So they've been raised in this culture. I want to be hopeful and say that there's hope for these people if you can remove Hamas, but they're like a tick. And so you would say, okay, so Dr. Valdez, what is your recommendation? I say that Israel press on until they eradicate Hamas. They are a terroristic group. And until you remove them, you're just going to exacerbate the position, and you're going to continue to have these problems repeat themselves.
And the only way they can do that is if they can go in as quickly as possible and eradicate Hamas, rather than it just being dragged on all this time. And
yeah, that's right. And so let me tell you this. This month we had 3 nations join the recognition of Palestine: Spain, Ireland, and Norway. They joined this list to recognize Palestine as a state. Lots of nations are recognizing them. But the concept's not wrong. It's the timing. It's the message. If you make a statement now, what you're saying is you support Hamas. You really? Is that what you want to say? Look, I'm all for the idea. The concept's not wrong. The concept's not wrong. It's the idea that you have to first establish a legitimate government. You have to establish a people that can lead these people without taking advantage of them, without taking all of their resources, seeking with one singular objective, which is to destroy the Israelites. And so there needs to be, if you want peace in the region, you need peaceful leaders in the region. And since the onset, Israel has bent over backwards, time and time again, to make peace, and they've only been met with violence.
every time Israel has presented a negotiation agreement, the Palestinians have rejected every offer.
Yes. And there's this pastor, this politician and former pastor called Chuck Baldwin. And he wrote a letter that he was chastising the American Christian leaders who were calling for a unified support of Israel. And he made several claims that I not only consider to be anti-Semitic, I consider them to be unbiblical and demonic. One of the things he said in this letter, and he published it a month after the attacks, in November 30th of 2023, he claimed that Israel is an aggressor state. Well, since 1948, Israel has been attacked in unprovoked ways, never doing anything to provoke it, doing everything they can to have peace, numerous times, 7, 8 times. And each time, Israel fought them back and took measures to secure their borders, and each time, Israel was criticized for their aggression. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what do you want to... If this was your nation, if this was your home, you do the exact same thing. And each time, the Palestinians have painted themselves as the victims. And nothing could be further from the truth. And the other thing that he posits is that Israel no longer matters, that now the Christian religion is now the new Israel. Well, that's called replacement theology, and it's a very dangerous theology. It leads you ultimately to reject Israel. Should we reject Israel? Well, other than the promise that God made, those who you bless, I will bless, and those who curse you, I will curse. Other than that big one, there's several reasons why we need to understand that Israel matters now more than ever. You see, if you read Romans 11, God makes several things that are very, very important. Make no mistake, Israel still matters. This idea of replacement theology, where the church has now replaced Israel, is not only unbiblical, it leads you to forget the promises of God. And it's also called dispensationalism, where God in dispensations has dealt with people in different ways. But the real way that we should see it is as a holistic covenant, and it's called covenant theology. And what covenant theology says is that Israel, as well as all the nations, are all under the same covenant, which is the blood of Christ. That the blood of Christ saves everybody the same, that we're all one people, as Paul says, Jew and Gentile alike, right? But here's the thing I want to add to that, though. Yes, absolutely covenant theology, but there is still a promise over Israel that is yet to be fulfilled. Let me show you. If you go to, and I'll do this real quick because I know that we've been talking a while, but I hope that this has been a blessing for you. In Romans chapter 11, Paul says this. He says, in verse 2, he says, God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. Because he says, has God rejected his people? Talking about Israel, he says, certainly not, by no means. That's verse 1. He says, not only has God not rejected his people whom he foreknew, he says that this was all part of his plan. Because he says in verse 11, salvation has come to the Gentiles as a result of Israel rejecting it, so as to make Israel jealous. Well, if Israel doesn't matter anymore, why is God interested in making them jealous? To provoke them to come back to him. Now, in that same verse, in verse 12, he says, if the rejection of the Messiah in the nation of Israel has led to the riches of the Gentiles, which is us, receiving the gospel, how much more will their full inclusion mean? And he warns everybody who's a Christian and people like Baldwin who tout themselves as Israel doesn't matter anymore. He says in verse 18, do not be arrogant toward the branches. And they're the natural branches. Do not become proud, but fear. And that's verse 20. For God has the power to graft them in again. That's verse 23. And notice now verse 25. He says this was all part of God's plan. For a partial hardening has come upon Israel. Listen to this. Until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. What do you think that means? Until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in.
It's a prophecy.
It is. It's a prophecy that God says, I've got an exact number of how many Gentiles will come to faith. And when that number hits, then Israel will come as a nation to faith. In other words, he knows exactly how many Gentiles. Well, who's the Gentiles? All of us. The Americans, the Ethiopians, the Japanese, the Palestinians. We're all Gentiles. But there's still a distinction with the Jews. Now, we're all under the same covenant, yes, but there's a distinction with the Jews. Now, listen to this. Verse 28. This is Paul talking in the New Testament. So if Israel doesn't matter, then why is Paul talking about it in Romans? Notice what he says in Romans 11:28. As regards the gospel, they are enemies for your sake, right now as enemies of God. But as regards election, they are beloved for the sake of their forefathers. Verse 29, if you think God has revoked his promise, listen to Romans 11:29. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. God doesn't take his promises back. They're irrevocable. Don't tell me that Israel doesn't matter anymore. Revelation 7, verses 1 through 8, that's the sealing of the 144,000. If you read Revelation 7, 1 to 8, you're going to read all of Israel, and he names them tribe by tribe. Remember the 10 tribes that were lost to history? Not to God. He knows exactly where they are. The 144,000 there is the sealing of the nation of Israel. He's saying that when the fullness of the Gentiles comes, then will come the salvation of Israel. Why is he specifying Israel versus all the other nations? Because the promise still stands over them. So why? And people say, well, why is it 144,000? 12 tribes of Israel times 12 is 144 times 1,000, which in apocalyptic literature means a multitude. The nation as a whole will come to believe. But here's a big one. Revelation 21, 9 to 14. When you read there, you read, John describes the new heaven, the new earth. This is at the end of all time. And he sees the new Jerusalem, not the new New York, not the new, Houston or new San Antonio, but the new Jerusalem. I'm telling you, it still matters. He sees it come down from the heavens, and he sees 12 gates. And on each one of those 12 gates, 3 gates on each side of the 4 walls. So there's 4 walls, right, of the new Jerusalem. And on each one of the gates is inscribed the name of each of the tribes of Israel. So if Israel doesn't matter, why are their names etched on the gates of the New Jerusalem at the end of all time?
That's a good question.
Don't tell me that Israel doesn't matter anymore. Here's my final thing. Baldwin says that all of the Old Testament prophecies regarding national Israel have been fulfilled, Every last one of them. That's what he says. Genesis 15, 18 to 21. That's the covenant promise that God makes with Abraham. Really? All the covenant promises have been fulfilled? So, Mr. Baldwin, if I prove that one statement wrong, your whole house of cards comes crashing down. You said all of the Old Testament prophecies regarding national Israel have been fulfilled. Okay. All I got to do is find one, because he says every last one of them. Okay. Did you ever look, and I want you guys to go look at it for yourself. Have you ever looked at the territory of the promised land that God promises Abraham? Genesis 15, 18 to 21. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your offspring, I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the land of the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. And we're going to add a map here so you can see it. My friends, I want you to notice the geographic border of the Promised Land versus modern-day Israel. And you've got a map there. You notice how big it is?
Wow, it's about 15 times the size.
Yes. The land that God described and promised to Abraham goes all the way in through half of Saudi Arabia, all the way into a large portion of Egypt, all the way up into the north into Turkey, and all the way far northeast as to encompass all the way into the nation of Iraq and Syria.
Mm-hmm.
It's enormous. Enormous. So, Mr. Baldwin, when has that prophecy ever been fulfilled? When has Israel ever looked like that? Don't tell me that all of the prophecies regarding national Israel have been fulfilled. Now, there's two answers there, and you answer it, my friends. Either God got it wrong. Good luck with that one. Either God, got one prophecy wrong, or there's still a promise over Israel. Israel still matters, my friends, and Israel matters to God. Therefore, we need to stand on the right side of things. If you want to stand where the world applauds you, you want to stand where Hamas and CNN and Billie Eilish and all these other Hollywood people, Cardi B, applaud you, go ahead. But if you want to stand on the right side of things, I want you to understand what's happening in the Middle East is a sign of the end times. But I'm going to tell you, all of this is no surprise to God. Jesus told us these things would happen. But Israel matters, and matters very much so. So we need to stand with Israel. We need to pray for Israel. Yes, we need to pray for the salvation of all people. I pray for the salvation of the Palestinians. I pray for an end to the war. I do, because nobody wants to see war. Nobody wants to see death. But more importantly than anything, I pray that the Spirit of Jesus Christ be presented there, that these things lead the people to conviction, to finally look upwards and say, you know what, Lord, there's a bigger thing here going on, and that this leads people in their brokenness to look upwards and receive the gospel. Did you know that there's stories of witnesses of people going there to deliver the gospel and people receiving Jesus? If this is the thing, the event that leads this nation and this region that has so long rejected Jesus to come to faith, so be it.
If it could happen to the son of Hamas, I have no doubt that God can work in any life.
Amen. And that's how we end this episode. We need to pray for that region. But you need to read your scriptures, and you need to know where we need to stand. We need to stand on the right side of history. We need to stand in alliance with what God has promised. There's still a promise over Israel. And when that promise is fulfilled, then we know that the time will come soon when Jesus will return. That's Revelation 7, the sealing of the 144,000. When we see the nation of Israel come to faith, then we can know the time is soon. So come, Lord Jesus. And the best way to pray for that is for the redemption of Israel. So I pray for my long-lost brother, my elder brother that refuses to come in. I pray that we be a part of that. Let's deliver the gospel to them.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pray for them. As we pray for all nations, but specifically over Israel, because God still has a promise over them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, final thoughts?
No, great points.
No. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. And there's a lot of material, but it was necessary. I feel good about this message, and I feel good about what we shared tonight. And I hope it blesses you in your life and your walk and your understanding of your faith. My name is Dr. Irby Valdez, and this is Divine Discourse. This is my brother in Christ. This is my son in whom I love so much and am so proud. And until next time, my friends, I pray that the God above bless you. I pray that his son, Jesus, guide you And I pray that His Spirit sustain you. Until next time, my friends, we'll see you in 2 weeks.